I have very intentionally let go of the traditional HR mindset that our job is to protect the organization at all costs. I believe this mindset set us back in terms of creates layers of policy and caution and process that really slowed work down and companies down. It made work feel really heavy.
You're listening to HR Superstars, a podcast brought to you by 15Five. On this show, we talk to strategic people leaders who are making a meaningful impact in their organizations and shaping the future of work. So get ready to be inspired and discover the secrets behind building high-performing teams and fostering a culture of growth and thriving. The future of HR starts here. I'm Karina Young, VP of People here at 15Five, and really excited to get into the conversation that we have today. We are at the end of the year, and that means planning season for most HR leaders. And it's so easy in this time of year to default to what's worked for us in the past. Sometimes the end of the year gets into a little bit of like plug and play mode, right? What's the easiest route we can take? We just want to wrap the year up. We just want to make it through to the holidays. We're going to go through the budget. We're going to talk about headcounts. Maybe we recycle some of the same program. We really tend to move toward reliability when our workforce is actually begging for something so different. Our people are looking for more meaning, more connection, and the business needs proactive current strategies that keep up with the changing landscape of work. So at the end of the day, the traditional HR playbook just isn't built for that. And what's really needed now is a shift in how we plan and what we plan for. We have to move away from the status quo and really lean into more learning, more experimenting, and being brave in what we think we can deliver. Be like Crystal at the end of that mountain, right? Like, what can we do that feels a little different, maybe a little scary than what we've done before? And that's why I'm so excited to have Crystal Boysen here today. She's Chief People Officer at Sprout Social and someone who's really doing just that. She's challenging what planning season can be and turning it into a real moment for transformation, not just operations. And her team is getting the chance to rethink their employee value proposition, rebuilding their strategy from the ground up, and aligning on bold moves to the business in a way that's really intentional and inspiring. Crystal, welcome. I love to ask people, tell me a little bit of the movie trailer version of you and your life, how you got to where you are today.
Oh, awesome. I love it. Well, thank you first and foremost for having me. I'm honored to be here and happy to chat. And thank you for the lovely introduction. So as Karina mentioned, I'm Crystal Boysen, the Chief People Officer at Sprout Social. Prior to joining Sprout, I've been at Sprout for just about a year and a half or slightly over. And prior to that, I was the Chief People Officer at Vimeo, and then also led the people function over in Sydney, Australia for Canva. So those were my last few roles that led me to where I am today. On a personal note, I live, as Karina mentioned, outside of Colorado, or outside of Denver in Colorado. I've got two kiddos, they're 7 and 9, and a dog, a pup that's also like a third child named Layla. So keeping busy both at work and at home as well. And I'm really excited to be here today. Lots to chat about. We'll get into my background. I didn't start in a traditional HR role, I think, which we'll get into. And, I think that's led to a slightly different perspective around how I run a people team and how I think about HR in a less traditional way.
Crystal, tell us a little bit about that non-traditional path. You started in IT technical world. Tell me a little bit about that journey and what got you into the people side of things.
Yeah, my path to HR and a CPO role is definitely non-traditional. I did start in IT consulting and technical training. I even dabbled in SOX audit compliance work. Talk about riveting. I know, which all does sound like a world away from HR, but it really did shape kind of how I lead and think today. I think one of my biggest ahas is when I was in the IT consulting world, I quickly realized that it wasn't the technical aspects of that role and job that I actually really enjoyed. What I found myself being really drawn to was the people part. It only took me about 5 years to figure that out, but I loved leading teams, right? I loved teaching. I got a lot into the training aspect of technical training and big system implementations like Oracle and SAP and things to date myself. But that was I loved that aspect of helping others learn and grow. And so that was, I think, the spark for me that I realized, I'm drawn to all these things that are really centered around people. What jobs are out there that that would be very people focused. And obviously HR popped up. And then once I made that leap of faith, and I never looked back. And I was lucky enough to make that transition within Deloitte. I was at Deloitte doing the IT consulting gig, but they had an opportunity pop up in their HR department that was really my first step into HR. So that was a great opportunity. But the thing that also really stands out to me is I love the way that my background has shaped how I think. Because what I've seen is like when you look at kind of quote unquote more traditional HR leaders, they often think program by program, like we need a better process here, or let's launch a new initiative here. Whereas my instinct based on my background is more always to like kind of zoom back out and ask, all right, where is the system actually breaking? So there's more of that systems thinking that I think consulting and understanding technology helps. You kind of get to the root cause of a problem. And that I think that lens helps me from putting what I'll call those proverbial like HR band-aids on what are really organizational problems or other things. So I do think that has been something that's really shaped me. And then of course, just taking that non-traditional path, I'm not attached to how HR is supposed to work. Like I didn't grow up that, right? So I don't carry that legacy mindset. And I think that's something that I'm aware of. If something's not serving the business well, I don't hesitate to rethink it or stop doing it altogether. So my path was unconventional, but I think it's really serving me well now.
It's so interesting to hear that you have this detachment from what HR is supposed to do. Because oftentimes what I hear and I see even with our community that joins these webinars is that there's like the fear of detaching from that if you say something didn't work or we tried a program, we didn't get the results, that is a reflection on you or your leadership. And there's so much sensitivity already within the HR function trying to get influence and buy-in and credibility. What tips or advice do you have for leaders who are here and learning to let go a little bit more?
I think part of it is what you shared in terms of actually from failure, quote unquote, like when you deliver something that doesn't work is like how quickly you learn from that and can take and apply it to building something new. And I think one of the things that we've done to make it feel, I love the saying, safe enough to try, because that's what I use a lot with my team, is it safe enough to try? Is it a one-way or two-way door? Oh, the other one I love is it like a trim, like a haircut or a tattoo, right? Like that, like those, I was like, well, when you frame it like that, I can go with even a really bad haircut, but I can't go with a tattoo that's going to be there permanently for life, right? So it's quantifying the risk a bit, I think is really helpful through one of those frameworks or lens of whether it's the one or two-way door or the trim or the tattoo, but also the like making it. We started this ritual on my team as well around brilliance and blunders. On every Friday, I'd start a Slack thread with my entire people team, and it'd be like share a brilliant moment and a blunder from the week. And the whole point was to one, share some highlights, but two, let's put the things that we've failed at or haven't worked and were a blunder out there and make it something that's just part of the way we operate. All right, what did we learn from it? We all make mistakes. Your CPO's out there leading the charge every Friday. I have more blunders probably than time to write. So I think just things like that, little rituals and shifts in your mindset can really help.
Yeah, I love that. I used to work for a leader who did something similar, and that every team meeting we had started with a failure of the week. And it was really nerve-wracking in the beginning to actually name a meaningful failure, right? Like people would kind of start off a little bit soft, but over time, especially the more that he leaned in to real failures and real visibility, it was like, oh, like it's okay actually that we make mistakes. Like everyone is doing it at all levels, and kind of normalizing not just that happens, but that we learn something from it.
Absolutely. The learning from it's the most important thing. And the only other thing I'd say there is we started piloting and experimenting a lot more rather than like spending months or quarters that you would usually spend on like designing an HR program. Let's say, see what you can do in 6 weeks. All right. Is it good enough, safe enough to roll out? Cool. Let's get out there. Let's test it. Oh, people didn't really like it. Let's iterate. Let's put a new version out 6 weeks later. So we are moving at a much more like six to 8 week build time for us versus like the quarters or even years that it would take to build a new program, right? So I love the speed that it brings along as well.
And what do you do for your team? Because a lot of that is definitely pushing people to the edge of their comfort zones, I imagine. I imagine they're coming from teams who maybe didn't do this before. How do you set up that safety and continue to keep pushing people?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is you have to create that psychological safety and like take away the risk of the fear of failure, because I do think that's real. And without some of that foundational trust, it's going to be hard to get people. But to push outside of their comfort zones. I think one is you got to lead by example. So again, I'll be the first to be out there sharing my blunders. I'll be the first to like lead a charge and put something out there that's not fully baked to perfection. But I think it's the team also has really seen the value in it feels good to put good work out. Like it's
Yeah.
so frustrating when you spend months and months and months building, years building, and then you launch something and you get like a cold reception from your employees. They're like, nah, that didn't really help me do my work any better. Or it doesn't make me want to work at this company any more than it did yesterday or whatever. That's like when you think about how defeating that can be, we've really been able to just shift our mindset. Like that's an expectation. This is how you work on this team. And like, to be honest, we had folks that didn't buy in right when I first joined. They're like, that is too scary. That is too fast. That is not traditionally how we work here. And they might have chose to leave. And then that was a hard transition. But like, so you need folks that believe in it and that feel the safety in your leadership and the team to be able to stay and work in this different way. And it takes a while, right? You're building new skills. We all had to learn like more agile type project management as a result. We had to like rethink the tools we were using. We had to, we're really pushing ourselves to leverage AI to help. So it's like, it did require a lot of change management, but we're seeing the rewards. Like we're putting out better quality work at a faster rate that's more impactful to employees. So that's like a win across the board.
I love it. And what else, you talked a little bit about these kind of 6-week planning sprints. What else have you done that you feel like is a different approach to planning cycles in general? What else have you shifted for your team?
Well, so this year we literally redesigned our entire planning process. So we overhauled it completely. And I think what prompted that was that we do some employee listening, like I'm sure everyone else does around whether it's surveys or focus groups. But what we're hearing from our employees is that something wasn't working. Like, for example, less than 65% of our employees said they understood our company strategy. We had a little bit better percentage that said they understood how their work connected, but generally we heard some consistent themes around, even if I do like generally understand the strategy and where we're headed, it's really hard to do the great work we want to do here. Decision making is slow, cross-functional work is getting stuck. And like, even though we have kind of directionally these priorities, there was no real like true mechanism to say these 5 things matter more than all the other things. So there was this prioritization and focus feedback bubbling up as well. So I'd say like we understood there was something not working in our current like strategy planning cycle. But then what really clicked for me is we often partner with this company called The Ready. And they have this article called, I don't remember the name, but it's about adaptive strategy. And I read it, and what it said, that the takeaway from this article is that most strategy fails, not because the plan is bad or terrible, but because organizations and leadership teams skip the most critical part of planning, which is actually asking the questions around how we're going to change the way we work to deliver this strategy. And so for me, that was like the light bulb moment of, yeah, we have some structural stuff we probably have to fix based on employees' feedback. But more importantly, we have to change our operating rhythms, our rituals around whatever strategy framework and planning process we have that fundamentally changes how we work. So like that's where we started. So we started with, look, if we're going to reimagine this whole thing, let's really reimagine it. So we went back to our vision. We actually redefined our vision. That was kind of the first thing we did. So we said we have a clear new vision going into 2026. It's a 3-year vision. So that was the first part, was just being honest that our old vision wasn't really serving us anymore. The second thing we did was we created bold moves as our transformation agenda. So we had 5 what we're calling kind of big, bold moves, strategic bets that are staying consistent for the next 3 years alongside our vision. So through 2028. And the language we used was super intentional. Bold moves was supposed to signal transformation, not just like incremental improvement, right? The third thing we did was we introduced more of a forced prioritization, because again, we suffer like everyone, there's so much to do and we always say yes to too many things. So we had these buckets of bold moves, right? But then we said, we as a company need to understand what are the 5 most critical cross-functional outcomes we need to deliver to create that like constraint that then creates clarity for folks. So we added a layer of OKRs under our bold moves. The only other things I could probably call out is we brought in Run the Business Works. We have this big transformational agenda, right? When our big, bold moves. But what we realized is there's a big part of the organization that still does like core run the business work that is super important. And we need to acknowledge that too. If you just kept
Yeah.
the organization aligned to bold moves, at least 50% sometimes felt like, I don't see myself in that work. And so I think highlighting that, bringing that up a level to say this is also really strategic, important work was really important. So everyone felt seen in the strategy. And then I think the fifth thing that we did, which was the most important and the big aha from me, was we landed the framework, which was kind of a big undertaking.
Yeah.
And then we said, okay, based on this process, here are the new rituals. Here's what we want to learn. Here's what like meetings we need to hold. Here's how we're going to hold ourselves accountable. Here's our new operating rhythms. And so I think that whole system was like the overhaul into planning that we went into this year. So it was no small task.
No, it doesn't sound like one. When it really connects to what you were saying at the beginning about the unique mindset and experience you bring into the HR world of really being able to zoom out and more deeply understand what's broken about a system versus the symptoms that we sometimes see in these sporadic problems, and really figuring out, okay, like if we actually want to be able to go through this transformation, I love that call out of rethinking how we work, because very few leaders, companies ever take the time to do that, right? It's like, that would be like saying like, great, in 2 months, I'm going to have like 20% more muscle mass, but I'm just going to do exactly what I'm doing today and hope that I get there. Like, there's no way we would ever do that in our personal lives. But at work, it often just feels like, sure, we can say this and people will get it. And I think HR knows probably better than most organizations, like you can't just tell people a thing and expect it to happen without coaching and development and clarity and explicit expectations or agreements. You need all of those things, but it's such a step that's just really often overlooked. I'm so glad you called it out.
Yeah, no, 100 that's actually, I think, the most powerful part of the whole equation and the system we're creating are the rituals. And we're still in the process of like fine tuning them and learning from them. But like, most companies run traditional QBRs. We're toying with, again, language is important, quarterly learning reviews. What are we learning? What do we need to stop, pivot, kill, move to RTB work from transformational work? So like, just to your point, asking the right questions, setting the right expectations, creating the forums in which we're talking about the right things, and making sure we're checking in on the strategy, because it's not like it's set in stone, right? The other kind of aha from all this is that same article I read about adaptive strategy uses this metaphor around sailing that really stuck with me. And it's strategy isn't a plan, which I was like, what? What do you mean? No, strategy's a plan. They're like throwing my world upside down. But then I kept reading and it's like, strategy isn't a plan, it's steering. And you can't sail in a straight line because there's wind and there's waves and weather and currents. So you need one eye on the destination, and then the other one is constant adjustment to the environment. So that's the other thing about our strategies. We're saying it's this bold moves of this North Star, but every quarter we've got to adapt. We've got to see what's thrown at, what waves, what winds, what currents are coming at us, and we're going to adapt. And so that's the main part of these rituals we're building around it, are that adaptive part of it. So I think that's the like other key takeaway. Yeah.
Yeah, you're blowing my mind. I was like, isn't it?
Strategy is not a plan.
Yeah.
What?
Oh my gosh. If we learned nothing else today, it's this strategy is not, but when it's so interesting to then hear you describe it in that, with that metaphor, because it's like, oh yeah, like it is a steering process. And no wonder then change management is so hard for companies, because we don't give time and space or acknowledgement to all the steering that has to happen along the way between here and the end goal.
100%.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. I'm going to be like dreaming about sailboats now all night long. I think what's interesting too in hearing you talk about this is, I think these are topics that a lot of HR leaders know about and are in tangential conversations, but aren't always taking the lead. But it is such an important part of people's strategy, which is, how do we all work together? How are our functions actually collaborating? Are we focused on the right priorities? Do people get the priorities and strategy? Do they know how they're here? And there are oftentimes I can see HR leaders get stuck in some of the same old metrics of like, here's the same old metric for engagement or for connection or for morale. And it's like, well, if you dig a little bit deeper, we can play such an important role the way that even you're describing, and actually just reimagining how a company works well. Like that can be within our wheelhouse to really take hold of and to make an impact on.
Oh, absolutely. This has been like, I've been really energized by this work where, again, of course, it's like, does this fit nicely in the traditional HR playbook of ownership? Probably not. But like, that's, again, I'm learning and growing to this experience, and I'm going to learn all the mistakes I'm going to make through this process. But it's really energizing, and it's been really exciting to see how the business is like rallied around this and how my peers and the
Mm.
executive team are so bought in and so grateful for what the team is bringing to the table with this thinking.
Just measuring employee performance is no longer enough. 15.5 helps your HR team take action to maximize performance. With 15.5's performance management platform, you can easily set up review cycles, collect ongoing performance data, track employee goals, and deploy customized campaigns that empower managers to drive growth. Learn more at 15.5.com or click the link in the show notes.
I want to talk a little bit about the work you've been doing on your employee value prop, because I know you've been reevaluating it. Talk to me about what sparked that decision for you and how are you approaching it differently?
It started with really something so simple, which I'm kind of embarrassed to admit, but we realized that we were failing at the basics when it came to an EVP. We didn't have one really. Of course, we have incredible benefits, great perks, real flexibility. We have components of how you traditionally think of an employee value proposition, why employees want to work for you. But when I looked at our employee survey data and, get feedback from employees, there was this big disconnect. It was basically, folks would say, yeah, our benefits are good. And I love that we are primarily remote and we've got great flexibility and all the things, but they could never really fully describe the full value and benefits of working at Sprout. And I know I'm very biased, but Sprout is a fantastic place to work. And honestly, when I asked myself and my team, could we articulate it any better? The answer was no. So that was foundational problem number one, was this communication issue and pulling together the story and then the narrative for employees. But it couldn't just be that, because that feels a little marketing and yes, you use EVPs a lot for talent branding and attracting, new talent into the company. But so I think while important, that wasn't the thing that I felt was really going to unlock for us. Because once we dug in a bit, what we also found is while the communication and storytelling is important, we also realized there were these shifting expectations, priorities of today's workforce, that had shifted so greatly that stuff, the perks and the time off and benefits and all those things, comp, weren't the things that mattered most anymore. So if we just spent our time trying to tell the story about, oh, look at our pay, look at our benefits, our employees were going to kind of be who cares? Sure, they care, but it's not the thing that mattered most.
Right.
And so what we did, so the team kind of has been digging in. We're in the process of creating this. So it's not like we've launched this beautifully finalized product, but through tons of research, my team has come back with they're okay, employees care about stuff that is very different than many years ago. People care primarily about growth and purpose and autonomy. And one of the biggest new factors is what it means to thrive, quote unquote, in a world where AI is changing everything about work. So that was really surprising to me, was a shift of how much employees were worried about how can this company, what can they do for me to help me survive and thrive in this AI dominated world, which was really fascinating kind of new research that I hadn't heard before. So that was the impetus for it. We're okay, we're not doing the basics well. And then through research, we're oh, shoot. And expectations are wildly different. And employees want so much, their priorities are different now. So just delivering the same thing isn't going to meet the needs. So we need to revisit now how we think about providing value to our employees.
Oh, yeah. And so how has that changed your perspective now going into having an EVP or what to do, or even what to do for 2026?
Yeah.
How is that kind of shifting some of your direction?
Yeah, I would say primarily in two ways. So the first thing we really wanted to do was get really honest about the gap between what we say and what our team members and employees really experience. Because I think one of the research points that was also super interesting, the research said if an EVP over promises but under delivers, that completely erodes employee trust. So you can't sit there and have this bright, shiny EVP if it's not the lived experience your employees have every day. And I thought that was really compelling. So it forces you. So we're coming in eyes wide open. We're doing a lot of employee focus groups and conversations to ask, what is meaningful and what makes work feel worth it? What keeps you here at Sprout?
Yeah.
We're taking that information to really curate a custom EVP based on our employee base is one. And then the second part is similar to the strategy stuff and the adaptive strategy. We realized we have to make our EVP pretty dynamic as well. What employees, again, cared about even last year is shifting about what they care about today. And then again, that whole wild card of AI is really fundamentally shifting what people want. So like we got to make it malleable enough that we're shifting and responding to our, changing asks and demands and priorities and expectations of our employees. And then I think the other thing, I said there's two, but I think there's actually three. The other thing that we've really realized is important is we have to connect the EVP, because otherwise it just does feel like some marketing HR thing. We're like, how do we tie it to like business execution? I hate to say this because benefits live in HR, but like even the best benefits don't matter if the day-to-day experience is filled with friction. Work is slow, it's unclear or chaotic. So like we're thinking about solving that as part of our EVP, which I think feels very different than previous years, is like our EVP, part of that is how we make decisions, how leaders lead, how people actually get work done, decision making. So our goal heading into 26 is to not just tell people what the EVP is, because they're going to be like, great, but it's really to make sure they feel it in their day-to-day experience. And I think that's going to be the most challenging part. And we haven't delivered it yet, so I can't tell you that we've nailed that, but that's our goal. That's where we're headed.
I love it. You said a couple of things that stood out to me there. One of them was it called back to this idea you were talking about earlier of making your people team much more agile in what you deliver and do. And then EVP needs to also be able to reflect that, because it does feel like year over year, what our employees need does change. I mean, sometimes it's like quarter over quarter. I'm like, man, this was really important a few months ago, but now landscapes have shifted and this thing is really important, which again, like in the old world of HR, it was so easy to say like, no, it's total rewards. And again, like that lives in our world, but yeah, it's like, it's your pay and your benefits. And we all certainly need that. We have bills we have to pay, but there is this deeper calling for meaning and growth. And hey, if I'm going to be spending my time here 40, 50, 60 hours a week, I want to get something I can carry with me out of it, which is I feel like we've all been seeing that and saying it for a while, but it feels so much more important to more people, even beyond, just like the particular generations we think it would.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like table stakes now, right? Where before it was the other things like, okay, as long as like we're in this contract and you pay me and I'll come to work and show up for 8 hours a day, but that's not the reality of which any of us work anymore. And rightfully so, employees want more and they want to be prepared, as you mentioned, for what's next in the future.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And the other thing I love that you shared is this removing of the day-to-day friction, because that is so much. I just think I think back to other companies I've been in, and so many of the problems that we've kind of root sourced and where do we end up goes back to those same things: decision-making, cross-functional collaboration. Like, how do these things actually work? And that's what really erodes trust or connection or engagement to a company. Like, again, and this is why we don't do there's no happy hours on Friday anymore. I'm sure some people do that, but right, we moved away from that being the big perk you get in an office to now really thinking about, no, I can guarantee that you have exceptional managers. You have someone invested in your growth. You can trust that we make good decisions here. How we make decisions here. Those are the things people want to know from their organizations. They want to have that personal connection to a business that, to what you were just saying, people just didn't prioritize in the past, even if it was something they wanted.
Yeah. No, and as we were doing all this research and trying to really wrap our heads around it, what do our employees want? What stood out to me was, we've always known career growth is important. We see it in every, employee engagement survey. It's top of the list of what matters to employees. Research shows it. But I'd say there's been this dramatic jump and shift to how it's almost become the number one spot. I think it's actually number 4 in the data I read, which is pretty high on the list still. But there was a stat that I read that stood out to me, and it was something like 75% of people who leave a job say no one had a growth conversation with them in the 3 months before they left. So we're not talking standard performance reviews, but literal conversations about how do you want to grow, develop, here's the areas I think you can. I mean, and that's wild that again, we're seeing that folks want that conversation. And what was an interesting overlay to this whole concept of growth is moving up the ladder of importance for employees was about this future confidence, because people are scared about AI. So they want to know, am I building the skills that matter? Will I stay relevant as AI evolves in my role? And what are you, employer, doing to invest in my growth and help me be future-proofed across AI? Which that part, again, was so interesting to me, because I was like, oh, okay, people care deeply. And that's probably one of the biggest shifts I saw in the data, was this rise of confidence and ability and wanting an employer to help you be future ready with skills that only humans can provide in the age of AI. I thought that was fascinating.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, and that's when we think about career growth, such a totally different way to think about it, because in many ways that's about preparing you. I mean, for the work you're doing today, but really for the future work that you might do, whether it's with your company or not. And I often find that so many companies are afraid to talk about a future where an employee is not with you. And the companies I've been with that have been most successful in this are actually like, no, we want to prepare you so that when you do move on from us, because at some point you like will, and that's okay, that you actually go out and are better at your job than when you were when you started here. You're a better manager, a better individual. You have these skills, and people think that's where I want to look for talent, right? And that, it's double-edged sword because you get people who want to poach from you, but it's like, what better compliment than to say like, we have an incredible workforce.
I agree. Yeah. Like one of my goals that I talk about as a people leader is that I want to be like a talent engine. Like I want Sprout to be known. Like if you want to grow your career and grow your skills in HR, you want to go work with Crystal and the team that she's built over at Sprout. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. It is hard when your good ones leave for the next opportunity, but yeah, it is at the same time, you got to give yourself a little pat on the back.
I know, right? Like we can't have it all. We can't do all the things, but we got to try to keep them for, as certainly as long as possible.
Yeah.
We've got a question from someone here, which as we kind of were talking about EVP, I'm curious to get your take on is, what do you think about when you're going to roll this EVP out? How are you going to measure how your employees feel about it, react to it? What are some of those metrics you're going to look for that tell you if it's landing well or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of what we've talked about so far, and like I said, we haven't rolled it out yet, so this could change as we learn more. But I mean, a lot of the metrics we have right now are lagging indicators from our employee survey, right? So we survey between once a quarter to twice a year, kind of depending on the year. And so we ask a lot of questions that relate back to the EVP. So we will continue to do that, but that's to me a little bit more of a lagging, not leading indicator. From a leading indicator perspective, I think there's some signals that we'll look for in terms of regrettable attrition, like our top talent and people leaving, or are they staying with us, right? Because an EVP is really creating that connection between employer and employee, which ultimately gets them to stay. We're also toying with, we haven't nailed it yet. So if anyone on this webinar knows a great answer, please reach out to me, help me solve the problem. But it's like, how do we turn that into measuring like the energy that an employee gets? And I'm using the word energy very intentionally because to your point, I'm less on the engagement bandwagon as like a real indicator of like, if you think about an EVP, it's like, I am so proud and I love to be at Sprout. And I'm so connected to this company and the work that I'm going to stay here forever.
Yeah.
And so how would you measure that? Like, how do you bottle that up and measure it outside of like, are they staying with you? There's something around an increase in their energy and they're like, I don't want to say productivity because that's not the right measurement either, but it's like what they're willing to give, their discretionary effort.
Yeah.
And I saw just a comment pop up. We do measure ENPS currently, which it's a factor too. But yeah, so I don't know the exact answer, but it's a combination of a couple of things. Yeah, I want some leading indicators, I want some lagging indicators, and I want something unique that I haven't quite nailed on the like energy motivation front.
Yeah, I worked with a really great comms leader in the past, and she taught me a lot. And we were kind of working on something similar, and it was all around how do you measure intrinsic motivation?
Yeah,
like, what are the signals that would tell us someone is like of their own accord, like ready to go a step further, willing to put that thing in? Like, what would be the 5 things that we could say connect to intrinsic motivation? I don't know. Maybe we need a separate webinar, or we can just go all deep on that. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I need to know what those 5 things are. That's exactly what we're going for. And I think that to me is the ideal metric and measure of success.
Yeah. And that's hard to do, right? Because it's so personal. And so much of what we do in HR, I think, is actually trying to get to those things, those factors inside of someone. Like I always talk about it in terms of levers. Like, can I put you in a position where the right levers go off each day and that you show up most of the time ready to do your best? Like, how do I do that? Like, how can I make that happen for you? Because so much of it is just us bringing people to water. And I'm like, please take a drink. Like, I hope that you have it in you to do it.
Yeah, and I love, like, if folks are interested in this topic, Daniel Pink wrote a good book on this. I can't remember the name of the book, but it was all
Drive?
Drive. It is Drive.
Yep.
Thank you. And it's all about
Yep.
like intrinsic motivation. And he said the three factors are autonomy, mastery, and purpose, I believe.
Yep. Yep.
And so it's like that is if we anchor our EVP around those things
Mm.
that drive intrinsic motivation, I think we'll have a much better outcome than saying, look at your benefits and look at your pay and look at your, all that stuff is foundational, but that's not what's going to keep people with us anymore.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to this idea of autonomy, mastery, and purpose. It's like funny how that framework always finds its way, like creeps its way back up into our worlds, but is so true. I mean, there's a real reason why that research and the data is behind it.
Exactly.
So, Crystal, as we get to our last few minutes, I've got a couple final questions for you. I guess first one is, what is the one thing that you've let go of from traditional HR that you really feel like has benefited you the most? And what would you encourage people on here to let go of? Like one thing that you just see people too attached to?
Okay, I have a strong reaction, and my team knows this about me. One thing, okay, so I have a really strong reaction to parent-like HR organizations or like the neighborhood cop patrol watch kind of relationship that HR typically has with a business. So I do think what I would say would be I have very intentionally let go of, and which maybe I never really had, but the traditional HR mindset that our job is to protect the organization at all costs. This, because I believe this mindset set us back in terms of creates layers of policy and caution and process that really slowed work down and companies down. It made work feel really heavy. But today we're in a world that moves way too fast to operate from a place of fear or protection. And yes, we have some basic compliance things and governance things that we're responsible in our roles. And I take that part very seriously. But I don't believe we should be bubble wrapping the organization, that's what I like to call it, as we have in the past. And so I think one of the things that I really push with my team is instead of designing for the lowest risk scenario, we design for the highest impact scenario. What I mean by that, or the question we'd ask is, how do we help people move faster, adapt more quickly, and operate with more clarity and confidence versus like, let's put all these like rules in place so they don't go outside the lines or whatever. And we talk a lot about giving enough scaffolding to where there's like guardrails. But generally, you have a lot of leeway when our scaffolding's out here versus in the past, a process or a policy or something creates a very narrow lane for them to operate in. Those are the things that do. We've eliminated or rewritten policies that existed purely to prevent edge case risk. Like, just let's get rid of those. If a rule added friction for 98% of people, that didn't survive is like sort of our mantra. I think you can do that through collapsing approval chains. You can run the quick small pilots versus big rollouts. Like there's lots of things you can do to start to safely, is it safe enough to try to start to widen the scaffolding for folks and let people run and roam a little bit more freely. So I think that'd be my answer.
I love that. I am a big fan of that. Very early on in my career, I had a really great leader who had a similar philosophy, and he was like, don't design something for like the worst case scenario.
Right.
Like that's like not the way we want to do it. And he was a product leader who had come into the people world and really like opened my eyes to like, oh, yeah, like there's actually a really different way to do this. And I love that is your one big thing, because it is so important. It's so easy to get in the scaffolding and in the constraints and like, here's this very small world you can operate in, but we can't expect people to feel that autonomy, mastery, purpose, intrinsic motivation, whatever it is, if it's like you are in this tight little bubble. You have to have room to fail, to break the rules a little bit, and to like figure out what actually is really meaningful for the business.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. Last thing for you is in 2026, tell us what's your bold move that you are most looking forward to?
Well, I think this conversation sparked something in me that I would maybe change my answer based off this conversation. So I'm going to give you the off the cuff, like hadn't thought about it more than 30 seconds, but I really think that the bold bet that I want to, or bold move that I want to take into next year is making the future of our employee experience shift, really pressing hard to see how we can shift it from being focused on output optimization, for lack of a better word, to energy or intrinsic motivation optimization. There's something there that I think is super powerful, because when you think about it, for decades, that's probably even like underselling it. But for decades, workplaces have been obsessed with output, how many hours you work, how busy you look, how many meetings you attend in a day. And I think we have some of that legacy thinking drift that still like exists in organizations today. So I think that what we actually need and what would drive higher performance across orgs would be to focus on human energy, like the clarity, the focus, the autonomy, the purpose, the mastery, those things we talked, tying it all back together. That energy makes people move faster, collaborate better. Like I think there's so many outcomes that would come from this, like in this energy and this intrinsic motivation. So I don't know, maybe it's the headline would be like, we're designing work around energy as a strategic, I don't know, asset, for lack of a better word. I can't think of the right word there, but like, I think that's kind of exciting. It's just this mindset shift. And what can we do about to really tap into this intrinsic motivation idea and energy idea?
Oh, Crystal,
I don't know.
I
I just
cannot
came up
wait
with
to
that.
see. No, I love it. We got I have to see where this goes. We got to connect in Q1 so I
Right?
know
Like-
exactly where this happened, because this is
Okay.
so cool. And I love that. I love that you were able to come up with a new bold move right here, right now. And I think that's so inspiring, motivating for everyone who's on here, that like sometimes it's just as simple as that. It's just getting the time and space to connect, to ideate and be like, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the thing. So I encourage everyone who's on here, break out of your molds, detach from something that's holding you back.
I think so. Yeah. I think my answer originally was going to be something, related to AI, but it's like, you know what? No, this is even more interesting. I think there's, both can be true, but
I like that.
I'm really excited I think we're going to tap into something really meaningful. So yeah, we have to come back because I think this conversation deserves more airtime once we've moved it forward a bit.
Okay, good. Well, for folks who are here, reach out to us at 15.5 if you want to learn a little bit more about what we can do with you to help you set up your goals, think big for 2026. We'd love to chat with you. And Crystal, thank you so much for your time and your energy and coming here today and just sharing all of your expertise. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great day, and thanks for joining.
Engaged employees are your most valuable asset. They're innovative, loyal, and committed to achieving exceptional results. By fostering a culture of engagement, you'll unleash their full potential and create a competitive advantage that sets your organization apart. But how do you do it? Check out 15.5's Employee Engagement Playbook linked in the show notes. It explores the undeniable benefits of employee engagement and dives deep into how to measure it. I promise you'll learn actionable strategies to transform engagement insights into measurable outcomes.